Yo, what is up? Get our music going here. Probably pretty good. What is up, everybody? We're back. It's been about a week and a half off. Playing catch up a little bit. So, uh, I think it was like last weekend. Um, or a weekend before last, technically. We had Cali Cup, big 40K tournament here in San Diego, and so much fun. But I got just wickedly sick afterwards. And I was sick for like the whole week. I'm still kind of like kind of gross, but I probably could have streamed on Friday, but I just wasn't feeling it. It's just too congested and everything. So finally getting over that and ready to get painting again and ready to like kind of transition off of 40K content for a little bit. We kind of reached the end of our 40K year and won't really know what's coming down the pipe until the uh, balance update in December. And so when that happens, I'll probably be painting a little bit over the holidays, just on my own time, and then doing LVO Las Vegas Open prep in January. But for right now, I don't really have any 40K stuff to do, so I'm going to paint some stuff from other games that I'm excited for. We've got Halo Flashpoint just launched on shelves, and so I'm going to be doing some of that. If you follow the Instagram page, I've already painted up, started to paint. I did some airbrushing on some models, and we're going to do some of that on stream here in the next week or so. And also Old Worlds. I've been kind of putting off Old Worlds until I do get to that like 40K downtime where I can, not worry about needing to paint stuff for 40K tournament scene. And yeah, so I'm excited. We're going to be working on some of that today. We've got the Slayer King, old Ungrim Iron Fist. Super cool new dwarf model. I mean, it's been out for a few months, but new to me. So this is going to be definitely one of the guys I put in every army that I play. And a friend of mine bought this ridiculously cool shield bearer model. So if you guys don't know, in Old Worlds, one of the upgrades you can give to a king is he has shield bearers, where he like stands on a shield and he's carried by a couple of his homies, and it's like double stack of dwarf. But this one is just super over the top. So you have like 5 shield bearers with a boat, with a throne, and the torches and everything. So this is all going to be part of it, right? And so like Ungrim being a named character, epic hero kind of guy, he may not make it into every list, but I do want to be able to use this model for lots of things, like just a dwarf king. And so what I've done is I've sunk a magnet into this where he can just sit on top of that and be a dwarf king with shield bearers, or I can just have him on foot like his normal model is. So we will paint this on stream. I'm just not ready to get to that point right now. I've got to do the base, and I kind of ran out of time today. I've just been working on getting that like assembled and cleaned up, and I was also working on movement tray and getting the measurements on the movement tray all done, getting that cut to shape. And so I've got to do like all the terrain on the bases and like the little diorama terrain on the movement tray, all that stuff. And I just ran out of time before the stream. So when we come back on Friday, I'll have this guy ready, or the shield bearer aspect of the model ready for paint, and we'll work on him. But for right now, just want to focus on the main man. Start getting him painted up. Lots of really interesting detail, like his embossed shield or axe, his embossed axe stuff, very very neato. All the stuff hanging from his beard and He's got all these little like axe totems hanging from his beard. Very cool. So yeah, like all the good aesthetic aspects of Old World's represented on this guy for sure. So let's get going. I'm gonna get him primed up. I'm gonna do 2 separate primers on this guy. And the vibe that I want to go for with Old Worlds is matching that kind of like old school cartooniness. It's one of the endearing aspects of it. And so because this guy's resin, I want to be doing kind of a light pass with our primer. Just kind of dust in the model a little bit. And in doing so, we're going to have kind of a pre-primer that's going to allow the rest of our primer to stick to that resin really good. So one thing really sucks about resin is if you go a little too ham with the primer and in its wetness, it doesn't adhere properly. And then the second primer is going to be a gray, get a dark gray. I don't want to go full pitch black on the primer just because we are going to go for a more kind of old school cartoony, very saturated bright colors. So I don't really think there's a need for us to have ultra dark shadows. Let's get our dark neutral gray primer. Still kind of a dark primer, but it is very different than pure black. Get a raid ink. What's up? Next level painting. Thank you for that raid. What's up, everybody? Starting the paint job on our first Old World model. Going to do a full primer of dark neutral gray. I was just saying that the vibe that I'm going to go for with Old World is that kind of old school cartooniness. It's one of the kind of endearing qualities of Old World. High fantasy, bright saturation. And so even though this primer is still dark with the dark neutral gray, it is very different than having pure black, because I'm not really going to go for those ultra dark shadows the way that we normally do. Oh, what's up, Kenny? Been a long day. This out pretty good. So for you guys that just joined, I was saying how this is going to be kind of our set piece hero model, the Old World Dwarves, Ungrim Iron Fist. It's the King of the Slayers. Super buff, angry dwarf mans. And I want him to be able to be used just as normal king, because you don't always want to take the named character model. And one of the unit upgrades for dwarf kings is shield bearers. And so it's just like a bunch of dudes holding the guy up on his shield. And my friend Steven bought me this very cool, very over the top shield bearer model with the little dwarven longboat and like the platform throne. And so you can see that I've sunk a magnet in there, and there's a magnet on his base. So that way, if I want to use this guy as just like a king, he can be a king on foot, he can be Ungram, or he can be a king with shield bearers, where I just put his model right up in there. And then this guy will sit, in the rank and file. So we will be painting this on stream. I just ran out of time today with working on this model, that model, and some other stuff like my movement trays and whatnot, getting those ready for paint. So on Friday, I'll have done all of the terraining on the bases, and we'll paint the shield bearer unit as well. Today, I just want to work on this guy. So he doesn't actually have a whole lot of like armor / clothing. He's got like this like chainmail like skirts thing going on in his steel clad boots. But most of the model is going to be his flesh and his ridiculous Slayer mohawk and beard. And so what I think I'm going to do is we're going to start off with like a medium brown. We're just going to airbrush the model like a medium brown color. And that's going to be a good base for kind of everything else that we do. And then I'll probably, in order, do the skin and then the oranges of his beard, and then start blocking in everything else. So I don't want mahogany. That's a little too dark. So it's like a really dark chocolatey brown. We're not going to get much lift out of that. So test out. Dark umber seems kind of dark too. Dark golden brown might be the trick. Yeah, I'm gonna shake this up really good though. I haven't used it in a while. It's kind of separated. All right, let's get this in the airbrush. Blow improver. Dinner? Yeah, dude, it was a rough week. Rough week last week. All right. Dark golden brown. Like I said, we just kind of want to do light pass all over. I think it was Kenny who taught me about the brown cheat code for fantasy stuff. So this will work for Old Worlds, it'll work for Age of Sigmar, where if you just do kind of like a brown base coat, it's a good base to work off of a lot of things. All right, looks pretty good. Give the airbrush a little rinse. Just using the airbrush here, blowing some air over the model, helping that stuff dry out a little faster. So what I'm going to do is get our base color flesh tone, and we're going to cut that into the model by hand with a normal brush. Just base coat it in, and then we'll go in with the airbrush when we get nice and close, and just do our little muscle highlights, our first muscle highlights with the airbrush, just to speed that up. And then we can do the same thing with our oranges, where like probably just for the big mohawk, maybe a little bit of the beard, I can come in and highlight those with the airbrush as well. What do we got? That's orange oxide, so let's grab our flesh tones out. Got some shadow flesh, bright shadow flesh. What else do we got? Advanced flesh tone. Dark warm flesh. I could probably get away with just those. So let's do a kind of a half and half here of advanced flesh tone and shadow flesh. Just for people who may not have seen them before, using almost 100% pro curl paints these days. So advanced flesh tone and shadow flesh, similar, right? This one's a little bit more pinkish. This one's a little bit more tan. Similar in color brightness. So we're just doing a mix of these two. And then also advanced flesh tone is a satin finish paint. And so I want a little bit of that matte paint in there to help us stick to the model. I can actually thin this out a little bit more. I end up needing 2 coats of this. It's covering pretty good, but I want to make sure this is extra smooth, so constantly trying to work small amounts of water into the brush just to make sure our paint doesn't dry out, and also to keep our base coat nice and smooth. And I've seen it in a couple of spots it might dry with kind of a thin spot, so take your time. Make sure there's no like little bubbles in the paint. I didn't have much face showing, but let's get in there anyways. And get a good eye line on this spot right here. Oh, I think that was... Oh, yeah, that was definitely part of his belt. That's all right. You can always do a quick little passive cleanup. Between steps. Just another really light quick coat for all these muscles. Make sure there's no thin spots. Really great sculpt. This guy's kind of hard to get a hold of. I really wish I had snatched it up when the initial order happened. I just didn't know that it was like a specialist model that was going to be done in resin. I thought it was just going to be a plastic kit. And so he's been out of stock everywhere. It might still be, and the resale market is absolutely bonkers because they're wanting like $90 for this guy. Luckily, I asked around and I had a friend who decided they didn't need him, so picked him up off of them for retail. Looking pretty good. Do the same thing. Just use the airbrush here. Pass some air over the model. Just cupping my hand around it so that air swirls around the model. Make sure this is good and dry before we start layering wet paint on top of it. Especially in little deep spots like that, I can see how the paint is still wet. And I don't want to put paint from the airbrush over top of that wet paint because the thinner paint from the airbrush is going to dry faster than the paint that we put on by hand. There's going to be less water content in there, and it's going to dry faster because it's being aerosolized onto the model. And so what can happen is if I were to airbrush over that, the top is going to dry at a faster rate than the bottom, which could cause the paint to crack. I definitely don't want that to happen. And sometimes if paint is still wet and I go in close, like get really close to do some airbrushing, even the very soft air from turning the airbrush weight down to work so close can push that wet paint. You want to make sure it's good and dry. Should be fine now. So I don't want to go too big of a step. So I'm just going to get some of that same advanced flesh tone. Just a drop or two of that, and then we'll go to some dark warm flesh. It's a little bit more of a tannish color. So we've got bright shadow flesh and dark warm flesh. You can see that one is a little bit more peach colored, more pinkish, and one's a little bit more tan colored. And then we'll do kind of a half and half of the advanced flesh and our dark warm flesh. Let's get that into the airbrush with some flow improver. I'm going to use my little quick disconnect dial here to basically close it all the way off so no air is happening right now. And then I just want to gently turn it back on. I'm going to use my hand here. I'm going to puff the air on there to get it to where I feel that it's correct. Yeah. Okay. So that way we can work really close to the model. Come in here, highlight our skin up. So just doing a lot of air to help that dry out, just sections at a time. Yeah. Looking pretty good. Dump most of that. I still got a little bit in there, so now I'm just going to go to straight Darkborn Flesh by itself. Some of that in there. Just a natural progression into our highlight, but it's not going to be totally pure. Okay. So now I want to come in very close again. I want to do just little pop highlights. Just kind of like this on my glove here. That's what we're looking for. Looking good. Good there. All right, so that's good enough for right now. After we do our shades and washes, probably have to go in and do some final little detail highlights. But for right now, that is good. Let's see airbrush again. Looking good there. All right. While I wait for that to fully set a little bit more. Just gonna give that a few seconds. And while we do that, I'll do a quick pass. On these parts down here. A lot of this is going to end up staying a leather base color. So I want to do just a quick cleanup. Nothing too crazy here. Just help me visualize model as we go forward, you know, because like some of this flesh tone is kind of creeping off of where it's supposed to be. So this is going to frame it out. These little doodads on his belt and everything. I don't want those being all flesh tone colored because it could throw my eye off. It's fine. Pretty sure these gauntlets are some kind of like dwarven metal, but just gonna do a cleanup pass of brown on them, all the same. Just keep everything nice and separated. Kind of like dialing in the focus of your camera. Can't tell you how many times I've like gotten to the end of painting a model and realized there's some little thing that I never painted just because like the initial base coats and stuff kind of threw my eye off and I never saw it. So for a fantasy model like this guy that has all these little bits and bobs on his model, I want to just keep everything focused in. Big axe is like gonna hinder me getting into here a little bit. There we go. Wiggle around on his magnet. Undead United, what's going on? Okay, cool. So now we've got that framed back in. So the next thing I want to do is cut in the base tone for his orange Slayer hairdo. I'm gonna grab some burnt sienna, some orange oxide. Gonna do like a 50-50 of those as our base. Because burnt sienna is a little dark, a little too dark for what we want, so I want to bring it up just a little bit. Grab some of our regular orange by itself, get that into the mix, and then some orange red. A little bit of that. Just do like a little 4 paint drop. Witch's Brew. Okay. I had the line between my paint being a little too thick or a little too thin. How does that connect? Okay, I see. I want a lot of control, but I also need this to be smooth, and I don't want to have to do a million coats of it by having it be too thin. Try to avoid base coating too much these metal rings in his beard. And in the past, I've had a bad habit about, oh yeah, I'll just paint like the whole thing, just paint the whole beard, and then I'll go back and I'll do that, and then inevitably I'll forget that those little things are in there. So even though it's going to take a little bit longer, I'm just going to try to not base coat on top of those. Real careful. To paint in his mustache without getting any on his mouth. Looks pretty good. Quick second pass on some of these spots where it's a little thinner. Right. Mohawk now. It's the easy part. I mean, I'm a proponent of your models. Paint them however you want, dude. And anybody that says different is kind of a chud. So I personally just really think Slayers are cool. So when I paint Slayers for like Old World or whatever, I do the like flaming orange beards and hair. But if you want to do something else for your army, like if you have some kind of cool theme in mind, like paint your stuff however you want. It's all made up BS anyways. So it's like if somebody's gives you a hard time, just be like, oh, this person's an idiot, and then just not engage. Starting to run out of paint a little bit. See if I can stretch this out to finish our base coat. Last little bits. Go over a few places. All right. Let that dry. So the next thing we're going to do is kind of like we did with the skin. I'm going to get the airbrush. We're going to create a mixture highlight color from base orange. And then we're going to get in really close with the airbrush and do some little pop highlights on different places. Especially the mohawk. That's going to be like kind of the big attention grabber of this model. It's going to be like his axe head and his big mohawk. But I want to make sure this dries out good. So I want a little bit of water. Use the airbrush to help it faster dry. I'm already liking how this is turning out. This is looking sick. So I don't really have a recipe, but I can tell you that we use Pro Acryl paints. Cool thing about this being live streamed on YouTube is it automatically gets saved to my channel as a video, much later. But I started off with some advanced flesh tone and shadow flesh. We just mix those together, kind of 50-50. And I explained that advanced flesh tone is a little bit more tan, and shadow flesh is a little bit more pinkish. They're both a darker shade, but that's just kind of the way they look. And then also, advanced flesh tone has a satin finish, and sometimes satin finish paints don't stick all that great when you're hand painting with them. So mixing it with the shadow flesh, which is like an ultra matte, help with that base coat. And then we went with the advanced flesh tone and dark warm flesh. So we just did a little mixture of this as our first airbrush highlight, and then I went with just the dark warm flesh as like the little pop. And so later down the road, probably what I'm going to do is actually not use a wash on his flesh. And I'm going to grab some of that advanced flesh tone and I'm going to thin that out really thin into kind of a glaze mixture. And I'm just going to freehand in the cuts in the muscle, like the little shadows, using that. So it's like extra clean, extra like cartoonish. Yeah, Mohawk's gonna be super cool. This paint was like really watery because I was trying to stretch it without having to mix more, so it's just taking a little bit to dry out. Getting there. So let's grab some orange oxide, which is part of our base tone mix. Do some of that. Do like a drop of orange red. Drop in half, let's say. And then a couple of drops of our just flat orange. Some flow improver in there, just a little bit. These paints are naturally a little bit thinner consistency. Oranges, reds, and yellows tend to be that way, so I don't want to make it too diluted with flow improver or thinner. I want to spray with a little bit more body. Okay, and so basic rule of thumb is the closer that the tip of the airbrush gets to the model for a smaller spray pattern, like we're got like a big flashlight circle, and we want to tighten that circle up and make it as small as possible. So we do that by bringing it in closer and turn the air down. So I'm doing this with a little dial right here. You can just crank it down on your machine as well. And then I'm just using my skin, my hand to kind of test the pressure. It's probably good. Just lots of air to help this dry real fast. Gently rocking the trigger back and forth just a tiny bit so that we are very dialed in to this one spot. I don't want to overspray on his skin because we already did that. That a teeny tiny amount of overspray on the flesh tone, but it's so small and thin you won't be able to really see it. Okay, let's go back to the front. Brighten that area up. These other details I'm going to have to pick out by hand. So now we can go to the Mohawk, and I'm going to hold the model in such a way that the air is going to pass this way over the parts and not down onto his skin. Cool. Let's get this little ponytail part right here again. Looking pretty good. All right. Dump most of this out. As you can see, I've still got some of that paint in there, and I'm going to go to one of my new favorites from ProApryl. If I can find it. Bismuth yellow. Just dump that right in there. Just a little water in my mixie brush here. That's all I really need. Stir that up. Just want to pop these areas a little bit. Nice fiery orange there. Super good. Okay, so what I want to do now is dump a little bit of this onto my paint palette. Save that for later. Oh, that's red. It's regular orange. Transparent orange. Want my fluorescent orange. All right, cool. So we get almost like a little like magical fluorescent glow going on. It's super bright. That fluorescent is gonna back the lights off a little bit. That fluorescent is just gonna like reflect that light like crazy. It's super cool. Use a little bit of water here. See if I can knock down that overspray a little bit. so go ahead and also grab a little bit of this. A couple of brushfuls of that. I put that on my paint palette. And then go ahead, clean out the airbrush real quick. Take our mix of orange with bismuth yellow in it. And we'll kind of do the same thing. So we'll do a very light coat of this on all these little braids. And then we'll go over that with a glaze of our fluorescent orange. Catch some of these stray hairs. That as well to help transition on the mohawk. Let's go over this with our fluorescent orange. Really, this is doing is just giving our fluorescent orange something to kind of back it up because it's so thin. Fluorescent paints are kind of like transparent paints. If I was to just put this over the regular orange, I would have to do like a million coats just to get it solid. Whereas if we do this bright yellow mix underneath it, it just instantly pops. Same thing, we're just gonna glide our brush over some of those stray hairs. Just to help that transition a little bit. Shadow him out a little bit. There. It's closer to what it looks like in real life. So to my eye, this is a really easy thing to see, but because of the way that fluorescent paint works, light is coming down, bouncing off of it, and getting reflected into the camera. So it's just kind of blowing it out right now. Let's see if I can take this light off. Take these off even a little bit more. A little dimmer, but now you can see that a little bit better. So it's really popping. You know what I probably could do too with my new lights is click them down. Click them down one intensity. Okay. Still popping a little better. Nice. Okay, so from here, I'm gonna be responsible boy, close up all of my paints. I'm gonna grab some of that dark warm flesh and thin that out into a glaze. What that means is I'm just very small amount of paint, a whole lot of water, where it creates a very translucent paint effect. And I want to just do some very light glazing on our muscle groups. Very, very soft. And when this dries, it's going to dry very soft. When I was cleaning up that overspray on his skin, I felt like I damaged the paint a little bit. Like up in here. So I'll clean that up slightly. Also just going to help accentuate our muscle details. This guy is like the most yoked dwarf of all time. And let's see, how long have we got? About an hour and a half. All right, let's do a cleanup. And I think that'll be a good stopping spot for the evening. So our same dark golden brown, that was our airbrush base. I'm going to use that again. Go in, clean this up. Just do really thin. And just like with our skin, this is gonna help frame everything out. Just make it to where I can focus on things. Anytime that I have a model where I have to do a whole lot of brush painting, I like doing this just because in our initial airbrush workups, it's kind of like a blob of color. And like I was talking about before, like I don't want to miss details on the model because I got lost in the sauce. So by going back and touching up these portions, it's going to help me to be able to see what I need to see. especially this helmet, like reframing that out. It's going to help us really see how our orange looks. Okay, should be fine. Little, little belt trinket in here, whatever that is. Oh, little doodad in his beard right here. Oh. Okay. Yeah, I need to maybe another magnet on his base or something so he stops spinning around. This is like painting on hard mode. So now all that stuff is reframed in. You can see like where his helmet actually is. You can see where the hair begins and ends, where our oranges begin and end. So it's like almost like kind of starting to look like a done model. Like got a lot to paint it still, but with just those two things, like all of a sudden this is a dude. It's not like a brown blob of plastic. Muscles looking dope. More orange is going to be straight fire. Look, it's super sick. All right. Make sure my paints are closed. Yeah. One last pass of cleaning the airbrush out. Run some cleaner through there. So I've been toying with the idea of painting this without real metallic paints. Not quite sure if I want to do that or not. So we'll see. Part of me wants to go really old school with the painting. So it looks like that Warhammer stuff before metallic paints were really in vogue. They're not like a real, million hours of blending non-metal metallic, but something kind of similar. And I got a bunch of very old school dwarf models rather than the like current ones off the shelf. So like for example, here's one. So this is like the OG Joseph Bugman. You guys remember Joseph Bugman from the fantasy stuff. So you can see very cartoony, very quaint. Like this is 90s Warhammer all the way, very into it. And they get a lot of chainmail. Like dwarves have a ton of chainmail. They got their big battle axes, they got their big steel helmets, all of that kind of stuff. So it would be quite a bit extra work. So I'm gonna have to decide whether or not I want to do that before we come back on Friday, because even though the dwarf army that I'm doing is like by old world standards a low model count, it's still a lot. Like I'm still gonna have to paint like 15 infantry guys to go in the brick with this dude. I'm gonna have to paint an Anvil of Doom. I'm gonna paint that other character as a runesmith, and then I've got to do like 18 Iron Drakes and a siege engine. So it's a lot of painting, and I mean like I kind of blocked out the remainder of the year to do all this, but I do want to work on stuff like Halo Flashpoint. I might want to jump back into 40k painting on stream at some point. So I mean, I'll have to see. Maybe we just do this guy. Well, I haven't decided yet. So not quite sure, but we'll find out on Friday. So that's all I got for tonight. A lot of progress. Good start to this model. Like I said, when I come back on Friday, we're going to be working on this as well, which is his big platform, his shield bearers with his ridiculous boat. That's why I put a magnet in his base. He's gonna sit up on there. Because I've got the movement tray over here with some of the other infantry models, so you can see like I had to make sure our movement tray was the right size and get that put together, and then I'm going to terrain them all at the same time so that this movement tray is like one kind of cohesive diorama thingy. And these are all the infantry I'm painting, so these back two ranks are going to be quote unit filler. So for anybody who doesn't play or never played the old fantasy, unit filler is where you use like diorama aspects on bases to count as like dudes in a rank, because this is a pretty big unit for dwarves. Like most dwarven units are like 5, 10, 15 at max, but for other factions like the undead, Skaven, goblins, a lot of that type of stuff, you're talking like I have 4 30 to 40 man units of whatever trash, right? And so not only is that cost like a ton to buy all those models, but it's like so much painting time, right? For dudes that just get removed in droves. So you have unit filler. So it's like not only is my movement thing kind of its own little cool hobby diorama thing, but I have these other aspects which are like wound counters, but they don't look like a cheapo dice just like sitting next to a unit, right? So I got to do that. I'll have that done by Friday, so I'll make sure to show it on stream when we come back. But time for me to get out of here, so let's find somebody to raid. For you guys on YouTube, gotta come over to Twitch. That's where all the fun is, so we can get this party going. Let's see. Looks like Duff is streaming. Let's raid Duff. Seen him in a while. Start this raid up so I can get out of here. Make sure to opt in. I'll see you guys on Friday.